Hey everybody, Torbjorn here again. Another episode of Skald Stories. Now, I wanted to make a little mini series on this, going over character alignments, because a lot of people have trouble distinguishing what makes a character stand out in terms of how they act among others. So, like, for example, what is Darth Vader? What is Frodo Baggins? How do we determine who is what? Now, apparently, the alignment system did away with. They don't do that anymore. But I think it still has some merit. And I'm going to explain why. So, we're going to go over these in order. And the name of this series is called Understanding Alignments. Now, essentially, what this is it's a character breakdown of certain characters that I believe fit the description or the idea of that alignment. So, it's to help give people a better idea of what these alignments mean. Because a lot of people think chaotic neutral just means you can do whatever you want with no consequences. People think chaotic evil is just evil for evil's sake, which it often is. So I'm going to give non-traditional examples to these examples. And I'll try to keep these as short as I can, so long as I get my message across. So the first one we're going to start off with is lawful good. Now, people automatically assume that lawful good means obeying the law, be a good person, don't hurt anybody, don't break the rules. This isn't the case. And I'll give you the most prime example of the poster boy for lawful good, which is Superman. I'm not going to show him here because he's not who I'm focusing on as the example. Superman is the go-to example for lawful good. Now, what makes a character lawful good? First, let's look at the word lawful. Lawful means that you follow a code or a set of rules to the letter. You follow them. If it doesn't match your code, you will not do it. If your code says don't steal, you will not steal. Basically, it's just another way of saying you obey the rules. So, for example, when Superman gets arrested, quote unquote, he goes willingly. They put the handcuffs on him, he gets in the back of a squad car, they drive away. He doesn't have to. Superman could easily just break out of those cuffs and fly away. But he personally. Damn it. I just woke up. Sorry. 1 second. So, Superman obeys the laws of the country. He believes that he has to be subject to the rules of the land he lives in. As we all do. As we all do. But does he? Think about this for a second. How many laws has Superman broken and gotten away with? He doesn't willingly kill people. He doesn't willingly do any of that, but how much property destruction do you think Superman has caused? When it comes to one person falling off a building, he's there, no problem, to save the day. But if a building gets destroyed, who knows how many people perish in that building? Or how many people below get hit by the rubble? Or how many people's lives get ruined by that building being destroyed? Let's say someone is really poor and they're living paycheck to paycheck and the building they work at is destroyed. Now they can't afford food for their children, and maybe one of their children is sick and blah blah blah. Now this is all hearsay and speculation, but the point of the matter is that he doesn't follow the country's laws to a T. He does his best, but let's face it, he is a vigilante. Just like Batman, he involves himself in matters that don't concern him, like the military or anything like that. He doesn't fight our wars for us, and he is looking out for our better nature. But let's face it, Superman would pick up someone's car and throw it. Do you think that is against the law? Is there a law that says you can't throw someone's car at something else? Probably not, but it's still destruction of property. And how much jail time do you think Superman gets on that? Just saying. So I believe the word lawful doesn't necessarily have to apply to the land's laws. It could be another code. It could be a code of chivalry that a paladin would have. He follows the code of his righteous order, or perhaps a cleric follows the ideals of their church. It all depends on interpretation of the alignment. Now, the word good, that's more straightforward. Basically, evil is defined as something that deliberately harms something else. And good is beneficial to someone else. So, for example, if I went out and I mowed someone's lawn, that would be considered a good act. If I went over to their place and burned their house down, I think we can all agree that would be a considerably evil act. So, what makes a lawful good character? It's a person that brings benefit to the world while also adhering to a code, to some type of rules and regulations and a moral obligation. And I have a prime example of what a lawful good character would be. This is Kenshin Himura from the anime Rurouni Kenshin. Now, it's a very big series. It's got over 100 some episodes in the anime. And I don't even know how big the manga is, plus several movies and adaptations and all that. So I'm only going to be going over a few examples. Now, Kenshin, in a nutshell, he fought in a revolutionary war. He was considered an imperialist. He wanted to keep the current government in power against a bunch of people that thought, hey, these are rebels. Now, I don't fully understand the political nuances of the anime itself, but as far as I'm aware, Kenshin believed that a strong government was what the country needed. Not a bunch of rebels that looked to oppose things and how they were, but rather that they should work together. And he fought on a side that was to stop the corruption. Know what I mean? It's been a long time since I've seen this anime, so if I'm talking out my ass, I'm sorry, but we're focusing on the character, not the story here. We're focusing on the character. So if I'm wrong, go ahead and beat me up in the comments or whatever. Go ahead, beat the crap out of me. But we're focusing on the character. So anyway, Kenshin was known as the Batosai because of his fighting style, the Hiten Mitsurugi ultrasonic sword techniques. Now, basically, what this meant was you trained your body to the point where you were so strong and agile, you could move at speeds that people could barely comprehend. Now, this series doesn't necessarily have like magic or superhuman things, but it does border on the fantasy side a little bit. So Kenshin was known as the Batosai the Manslayer because of his skill with Batojutsu, which is the art of drawing the blade from the sheath, from the scabbard, if you prefer. And his attacks were so fast they could kill in an instant. And he slaughtered dozens, hundreds of people in this war. That's why he earned the title Manslayer. But once everything was said and done, he hung up his sword and said, I will never kill again. Ever. He will not kill. So he went from this to this. Now, do you notice anything funny? Do you see anything strange about this? Look at his sword. The blade is on the back end of the sword. He was so fixated on his no-kill uh, oath that he uses a reverse blade sword, a sword that has the blade on the back end. So no matter what he does and attacks, he won't kill anybody. He could hurt them, sure, but he will not deal lethal damage to them. So throughout the anime, he's constantly holding back. He's never truly fighting at his absolute peak until something comes along that makes him possibly skirt the line. Now, I'm going to go over a few fights where it shows his moral character. So, the first one we have is his fight against Jine Udo. Now, what happens is Jine Udo is an assassin for. He was formerly a member of the Shinsengumi, and the Shinsengumi were basically highly elite cops. And because Kenshin was an imperialist and he was kind of seen as a vigilante rebel, they were constantly at odds. So they know of him. And Jine kidnaps a girl that he knows because he wants to challenge the legendary Batosai to a sword fight. So he kidnaps a girl named Kaoru. And they initiate a fight. But of course, Kenshin does not fight to kill. He's fighting to save Kaoru. But he also does so non-lethally with his reverse blade sword. Jine doesn't like this. He wants to see the Batosai of legend. He wants to see that fire in Kenshin's eyes once again. So what he does, remember, this is a low magic kind of scenario, but there still are some hints of mysticism. Jine casts a spell. God, what is it called? The Shinowipo? I want to say it's called the Shinowipo. Basically, his eyes induce an illusion on the target that paralyzes them. So he looks over to Kaoru and he stares at her with a more potent version of his ability. And what this means is normally he can just paralyze his victim. But he hit her with an improved version which paralyzes her so deeply that her lungs she can no longer breathe. Now there's two conditions to undo this. Either the target has to be strong enough to will themselves out of it, which Kenshin is capable of, or the caster has to die. Now, Kaoru isn't necessarily the strongest swordsman. I won't get into her story. That's for you guys to find out. But basically, she can't break out of it on her own. So Kenshin has a choice. Either kill Jine or let Kaoru die. He decides to turn back into Batosai. So what happens is he basically taps into his hidden power that he locked away so he wouldn't be as lethal to people. And he got faster, he got stronger. He had that intent to kill again. Why? Because he wanted to save someone. He was willing to break his vow in order to save somebody. Now again, how does this tie into a lawful good character? He's breaking his rule. He's going to kill somebody. But look at the intent. Look at the intent behind it. This is an innocent girl that was kidnapped by this assassin. And she's going to die unless Kenshin kills Jine. That's the only way to break the spell. So he has to think to himself, if I don't do this, I am responsible for this girl's death because I refused to break my vow. That's the thing with lawful good characters. A lot of people think lawful good means you have to obey the rules to a T. You don't. It all depends on whose rules you are obeying. You don't have to obey the state's rules, you have to obey your own rules. And Kenshin says, I will not let this girl die. If I have to sacrifice myself, I will. And he is. He's willing to do that. He's willing to go back to the darkness in order to make sure that she lives. Won't spoil the ending. Have fun seeing that on your own. Here's another instance of what happened. He comes across his old rival, Saito. Now, Saito was one of the higher ranking members of the Shinsengumi who had fought Kenshin multiple times. Now, when they fight each other, they're basically on equal terms. So the longer they fight, the more Kenshin starts to dip back into his old ways. He starts to fight more aggressively. He starts to fight with more precision, more speed, more power. Saito is reminding him of the past and is getting closer and closer to becoming lethal. They practically almost kill each other. Once the fight is over, Kenshin literally punches himself in the face so hard his forehead like starts to bleed because he has to snap himself back to reality. He doesn't kill Saito in the entire fight, but he certainly beat the crap out of him. So, again, as much as he wanted to dip back into that darkness that he has, he did not do it. He did not kill. Because that's his personal code. He doesn't want to bring harm to anyone, let's say, but he has to do it necessarily in order to fight and defend people. Because this is an era where fighting was everywhere. Everyone's carrying a sword around. There's even a point in the anime where they say that swords are illegal to carry around. Yet, Kenshin carries one because swordsmanship is really all he knows. So he carries around. So he's breaking the rules. He's breaking the law. But why is he a lawful good character? Because he does respect the law. He doesn't draw his sword unless he absolutely has to. And that's one of the reasons why he has a reverse blade sword. People look at it and go, you couldn't kill anyone with this butter knife. Whatever, go ahead and carry the sword, I guess. It's his skill that's the danger, not the weapon. But he still does break the state's laws. So you might think to yourself, okay, well, why isn't he a neutral good character? Because he still obeys the laws. He might not follow them with his personal code, but they do line up personally. If the law lines up with his personal code, which a lot of the time it does, the difference between lawful good and neutral good is how much you skirt that line. Neutral good is even willing to break their own rules if it means doing the right thing, which Kenshin often does. But he doesn't do so on a personal level. If a person believes that they are doing this for a personal vendetta, like take for example, a very popular neutral good character is Spider-Man. So let's say Spider-Man wants to bring down a bad guy that the law says is innocent. But Spider-Man believes otherwise, so he goes after the person and stops them. That's seen as neutral good because you are willingly going after the person against the law, against their wishes. Kenshin is considered lawful good because he doesn't do that. If someone gets away from the government, he basically says, well, we'll keep an eye out for him. We'll keep an eye on him. He doesn't go out and vigilante because he knows this person is bad. He wants to believe in the system, even if he's not necessarily a part of that system. He wants to have faith in it. He wants to leave it alone and let the system do its thing. There is a third point that I want to make. It's when Kenshin fights a guy named Cho. Now, Cho is his title is the Sword Hunter because he likes to collect very strange and obscure weapons. Things that are very unorthodox, not just a simple sword. So Cho finds out about a swordsmith that makes those kind of weapons. And he has one last creation he didn't release out to the public, I should say. It's stored away in a shrine. So Cho goes to the sword maker's son because the sword maker is dead. And he finds out that the sword maker's son wants to live a peaceful life. He doesn't want to be a swordsmith. In a he works in a forge, but he makes like kitchen knives, stuff like that. He has a family, he has a kid, he has a wife. So Cho basically says, "Hey, can I go see your father's sword?" He doesn't tell him he wants to take it. He just says he wants to see it. But the guy says, "No, it's better off in its resting place." And Cho says, "Okay." So he takes the baby and he puts the baby on the edge of his sword's sheath and he flicks it upward and the sheath flies off of the sword with the kid on there and he holds his sword up and the sheath lands perfectly back onto the sword and the kid is still there. The parents are freaking out. And he's like, "Well, this is a really tough trick to do. Not many people can do this and I don't know how many times I can do this before I slip up." And they tell him where the sword is located. In order to rescue the child, Kenshin hears about it and he goes to fight Cho. However, Kenshin's sword is broken. And he also came to that smith's son to forge him a new reverse blade sword. And he saw what the family was like and he's like, "I can't ask them to do this." He didn't try to convince him. He didn't try to say, "Hey, I really need this in order to fight evil." No. He said, "I will respect this man's wishes. He has a family. He doesn't want to create weapons that kill. He wants to live a peaceful life, and I'm not going to take that away from him." That's the difference. That's the difference. He leaves people alone. So when he finds out that Cho has this child, he tries to go stop him, sword or not. He has the broken sword in his sheath, probably as an intimidation factor, and he does his best to fight Cho. He does his hardest. But eventually, Cho does end up overpowering him, and they do get the sword from the shrine. Kenshin does. So as Cho is going for the child, Kenshin has to make another choice. He has to either kill Cho or let the kid die. And again, he makes the same choice he did with Kaoru. He chooses to break his vow, he draws the sword, and he chooses to kill Cho in order to save this kid. He is willing to sacrifice his personal vow in order to stop him. I won't spoil what happens, but it's definitely worth checking out. So, what makes a character lawful good and separates them from the other alignments? Again, lawful good doesn't necessarily have to follow the rules of the state. It has to follow whatever rules that you are willing to follow. But you have to have respect for other rules that you don't necessarily follow. Kenshin doesn't want to kill. That's his personal code. His want to help people is part of his personal code. He leaves the law alone because he's not opposed to it. He is not bound to the law. So he doesn't go out looking for criminals to fight and bring to justice. He lets justice find them. If he walked past an evildoer in the street, he wouldn't bother them. He would look at them and say, "They're not hurting anybody. We're just walking down the street." There's a kid in the anime that picks his pocket, Yahiko. He picks his pocket, takes his money. Kenshin stops him. Or I think Kaoru stops him. Anything, something like that. Somebody stops him. And Kenshin literally picks up his wallet, gives it back to Yahiko, and says, "Next time, don't get caught." And then he walks away. He gives the kid his money. He gives the kid his whole wallet. And he says, "Next time, don't get caught." He doesn't know what this kid's situation is. All he sees is a kid that needs money. So he gives up his money. He was just robbed. He was just robbed. A normal person would look at Lawful Good and say he should have brought him to justice. He should have grabbed the kid and turned him over to the police. But no. Kenshin saw a kid that needed money for some reason. So he gave him his money. Because his personal code says to help people. Now, does he know for a fact this kid was evil? No, he just assumed. He didn't know what Yahiko was planning with that money, but based on the assumption this was a kid that was pickpocketing. And it's safe to assume that when a kid resorts to that, it's usually because they're desperate. So Kenshin did inadvertently break the law by letting the kid go. If he sees someone being a bully, like beating up someone in the street, he will intervene and help them. But if they're having an argument, he'll just walk away and say, "It's not my business. It's their business. I'm going to stay out of it." The balance for Kenshin is between his light and dark side, hence the picture. He was once one of the most infamous killers in the imperial age of Japan. And he completely 180'd, and now he won't kill anybody. That's his code. No matter how tough or strong they are, he will not kill them. No matter how dangerous they are, he will not kill them. Even if it would help dozens of people. Because he sticks to his personal code. That's what a lawful person does. They stick to the rules, whatever those rules may be. Like I said before, it could be a paladin following their religious order, or it could be a cop following the laws of the country or the state. It's all about interpretation. So people that see a lawful good character, they go, "Ugh, a babysitter. I have to follow the rules and be good." It all depends on whose rules you're following and whether or not your acts benefit people or harm people. A lot of the time, people will ask, "What is a lawful good character?" Well, do you obey the law? Yes. Do you believe you're a good person? Yes. Then you're lawful good. Not that simple. Not that simple. You have to take a deeper look inside the character in order to find out what makes them lawful good. Superman obeys his laws. Batman obeys his laws. They believe their own personal code is what drives them. And they use that personal code to help people. That's lawful good. So, in conclusion, in order to understand an alignment, you have to break it down and figure out what these words mean. Now, I didn't exactly do the best job of portraying this character, but I hope my point got across. Lawful good isn't necessarily the most annoying alignment because you have to follow the rules, because you have to be a good person, because if you break any of these rules, oh, you're a bad person. No. No. You're allowed to break the rules. It all depends on the context of why you're breaking those rules. Kenshin was willing to kill twice. He was willing to toss aside his own personal values in order to save someone. Because his personal code isn't just to not kill, it's to make sure that other people don't come to harm. Because he was once a most infamous killer, at least among the state. He wants to bring peace and joy to other people. And he's willing to martyr himself to do that. So you have to ask yourself, what is your character willing to do? What kind of rules are they willing to follow? And what kind of rules are they willing to break? And why? Why is the key word in this. Ask yourself that, and you'll find the answer. Okay? So, I hope this helps out, and I hope now you understand the alignment of lawful good. Thank you. Tell your story, my friend.